All right, welcome in everyone. You ready to dive deep?
Oh, absolutely. Always up for an insightful journey through history, especially when we've got such a unique set of sources to work with.
This collection of Ashley County Now posts, it's like someone handed us a time capsule. It's got a little bit of everything.
I was really struck by the range, honestly. You've got these big historical trends, personal reflections, and even a bit of a mystery thrown in for good measure. It's a really interesting blend.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right? We get to see Ashley County evolve through these different lenses. It's like piecing together a puzzle.
It's like getting glimpses into different rooms of the same house, each telling its own story, but ultimately contributing to a larger understanding of the whole structure. And what's really cool is how we can see the threads connecting the past and the present. It's all intertwined.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of threads, we've got a lot to unravel today. The posts cover everything from the slower pace of urbanization in Arkansas in the late 1800s to some pretty profound lessons from the Reconstruction era, plus a look at how some of those progressive era governors really shaped the state.
Then we're going to really zoom in on the lives of those early Ashley County builders, the folks who literally built the foundations of the community. Those stories are always so captivating to me.
Oh, totally. Plus, we'll delve into those early days when Ashley County was still essentially a great wilderness, try to solve a little historical mystery surrounding the namesake of Carter Township, and even take a moment to reflect on the simple beauty of front porch sitting. It's going to be a good one.
I love how these pieces taken together offer such a rich and nuanced understanding of how a specific place develops its own identity. It's not just about dates and events, it's about the people who lived these stories.
It's about understanding the heartbeat of a community, right? How those individual heartbeats create this larger collective rhythm that echoes through time. So let's get started. And where better to begin than with urbanization, or perhaps more accurately, the somewhat slower pace of urbanization in Arkansas between 1880 and 1900.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because even though we see some significant urban growth in Arkansas during this period, with cities like Little Rock, Fort Smith, Pine Bluff, and Texarkana really starting to take off, it was still a notably gradual process compared to some other parts of the country.
Right, and we can't talk about this era without acknowledging the huge impact of the railroads. Those lines, especially the Missouri Pacific and the St. Louis Southwestern, they really were the game changers, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. They were like the arteries of progress connecting these emerging cities, making it possible to move goods and people more efficiently than ever before. And, securing a railroad connection could make or break a town's fortunes back then.
No kidding. If you were on the line, you had access to markets, to new residents, to the flow of ideas. It was a recipe for growth. But those towns that got bypassed, they faced an uphill battle.
It's amazing to think about how something like a railroad route could have such a profound impact on the trajectory of a whole community.
And it wasn't just about physical connections either. The railroads also brought a sense of interconnectedness, a shrinking of distances that really started to reshape people's perceptions of time and space. It must have felt like the world was suddenly getting a lot smaller.
But even with this growth, even with the railroads changing the landscape, there's this really interesting point that comes up in the posts. Life in those growing cities wasn't purely urban, as we might think of it today. There was still a strong connection to the rural way of life.
Yeah, that's a great observation. You would have had people living within city limits who were still very much involved in agriculture, maybe tending gardens or raising chickens on the outskirts. It's like the lines between urban and rural were a bit blurry back then, much more fluid than they are now. It makes you wonder, right, if maybe that slower pace of urbanization, that lingering connection to the rural roots, if that maybe shaped Arkansas's development in some unique ways. Did it affect its social fabric, its political landscape? It's something to ponder, for sure.
It's certainly a fascinating question, one that historians continue to debate. And it speaks to the broader point that these historical processes, they're never simple or straightforward. They're full of nuance, contradictions, and these fascinating little wrinkles that make them so intriguing to explore.
Speaking of complexities, the next topic we need to unpack is Reconstruction in Arkansas. And let me tell you, these Ashley County Now posts really highlight some enduring lessons from this era, lessons that still resonate deeply in our world today.
Reconstruction, it was this bold and ultimately tragic attempt to rebuild the South after the Civil War, to really lay the groundwork for a society where Black Americans could finally exercise their full rights as citizens. But as these posts make clear, it was a period of incredible progress, brutal setbacks, and ultimately a story of unfulfilled promises.
And the first lesson that really jumps out is this Stark reminder that progress isn't always linear. The rights and opportunities that Black Arkansans gained during Reconstruction, they were tragically rolled back in the decades that followed.
It's heartbreaking, isn't it? You see these incredible advancements. The right to vote, the ability to hold office, expanded access to education, new avenues for economic participation. It was a moment of genuine hope and transformation. And then, as the posts detail, it all starts to unravel.
The resurgence of white supremacy, the rise of voter suppression tactics like poll taxes and literacy tests, the insidious creep of Jim Crow laws, it's a reminder that the forces of regression can be powerful, and that winning a battle doesn't always mean winning the war.
It makes you think, right?
Right.
What were the missed opportunities during Reconstruction? Were there ways to more firmly entrench those rights and protections? What could have been done differently to prevent that backsliding? It's a question that historians continue to grapple with, and it has very real implications for how we approach social justice movements today.
Absolutely. The second lesson that comes through loud and clear is the ongoing, relentless fight for voting rights. The posts really emphasize just how central the right to vote was for freedmen during Reconstruction. It was their voice, their power, their ability to shape their own destinies.
And it's not like it was just a symbolic right. It translated into real political influence. In some parts of Arkansas, Black voters were the majority, and that meant they had the power to elect officials who represented their interests, to shape policies that impacted their lives. It was a radical shift in the balance of power.
And then, after Reconstruction ends, those hard-won gains are systematically stripped away. Those voter suppression tactics that we mentioned earlier, they weren't just random acts of discrimination. They were deliberate, calculated efforts to silence Black voices and consolidate power back into the hands of white elites.
And it's not ancient history either. These Ashley County Now posts draw a direct line from Reconstruction to present-day Arkansas, highlighting the ongoing debates and controversies surrounding voting rights in the state. It's a reminder that the fight for equal access to the ballot box is a perpetual struggle.
It's a battle that continues to rage, and it's a battle that demands our constant vigilance. We can't afford to be complacent. We can't assume that those hard-won rights are permanently secured.
Absolutely. Now, the third crucial lesson focuses on this deep-seated issue of racial and economic inequality. Even after slavery was abolished, even with the legal gains made during Reconstruction, the ability of Black Arkansans to achieve genuine economic independence was severely hampered.
The posts talk about how, even though freedmen were legally free, they often faced immense challenges in trying to acquire land, to start their own businesses, to build generational wealth. They were up against deeply ingrained systems of oppression that weren't easily dismantled, even with legal pronouncements.
It's like they were running a race with weights tied to their ankles, right? They were starting from so far behind, facing so many obstacles that were deliberately placed in their path. And then the rise of sharecropping, it's almost like a cruel twist of fate. It was meant to be this system of agricultural labor, but it often trapped Black farmers in cycles of debt and dependence.
It's tragic, really. And those economic disadvantages were further exacerbated after Reconstruction with the rise of Jim Crow, which led to widespread land loss among Black farmers and severely limited their opportunities in other sectors of the economy.
And the echoes of those injustices can still be felt today. The racial wealth gap in Arkansas and across the nation is a direct result of those historical systems of oppression. It's a stark reminder that true equality requires more than just legal pronouncements. It requires a fundamental restructuring of economic systems and a real commitment to reparative justice.
No doubt about it. And the final lesson from Reconstruction that these posts emphasize is perhaps the most profound. The way we remember and teach our history deeply matters. For far too long, the story of Reconstruction was distorted, minimized, or even outright erased from the dominant historical narrative.
It's like this crucial chapter was deliberately ripped out of the history books, replaced with a sanitized version that downplayed the violence, the resistance, the complexity of this era. The heroic efforts of Black leaders were often minimized, and the brutality of white supremacy was glossed over.
It's almost like there was this collective amnesia about a period that was just too messy, too uncomfortable, too challenging to grapple with, honestly. But thankfully, that's starting to change.
More and more historians, educators, and activists are working to recover those lost stories, to tell a more accurate and complete history of Reconstruction. And, that reexamination isn't just about correcting the record. It's about understanding how those historical injustices continue to shape our present.
Exactly. The debates we have today about race, about inequality, about the legacy of slavery, they're all deeply intertwined with the way we understand and teach about Reconstruction. It's a reminder that history isn't just about the past. It's a living, breathing force that shapes our present and our future.
It's about understanding the roots of the challenges we face today so we can better address them. All right, so we've talked about urbanization and Reconstruction, and now let's move into the Progressive Era in Arkansas, a period that, as these posts suggest, was full of contradictions and complexities. And what better way to explore this era than through the lens of the governors who led the state?
Sounds good to me. Let's dive into those gubernatorial personalities. First up, we have Jeff Davis, a real firebrand of a politician. He seems to have been a master of populist rhetoric, appealing to the frustrations of poor white voters by railing against those big banks and corporations.
Oh, he knew how to work a crowd, that's for sure. And he was very successful at tapping into that deep well of resentment that many people felt toward those perceived centers of power. But, his populism had a dark side.
Right, there's this real tension in his legacy. On the one hand, he championed some progressive causes, like regulating railroads and pushing for prohibition. But on the other hand, he wasn't shy about exploiting racial divisions and using prejudice as a tool to solidify his power base.
Exactly. It's like he embodied both the promise and the peril of populism, its ability to mobilize people for positive change, but also its susceptibility to demagoguery and exclusionary tactics. He was a product of his time, but he also actively shaped that time in ways that were both positive and deeply troubling.
It's a complicated legacy, to be sure. After Davis, we have George Donahue, who seems to have been a much more pragmatic, business-minded leader. He focused on bringing a sense of order and efficiency to state government, and he achieved some real and lasting reforms.
Donahue was definitely a different breed of politician. He had this strong sense of integrity, a belief in good governance, and a real talent for getting things done. One of his most significant achievements was abolishing the convict lease system, which was basically state-sanctioned slavery by another name.
That was a huge step forward for human rights in Arkansas, no doubt about it. And beyond that, he reorganized a lot of state institutions, pushed for improvements in infrastructure and education, and even oversaw the construction of the current state capitol building. He left a pretty significant mark on the state.
He was a builder, both literally and figuratively. He believed in laying strong foundations and creating systems that could function effectively, and in many ways he set the stage for future progress in the state.
After Donahue, we have George W. Hayes, who seemed particularly focused on modernizing the state's infrastructure, especially its roads. He was a big proponent of that 1913 Alexander Road Improvement Act, which really kicked off a wave of road construction across Arkansas.
Hayes recognized that good roads were essential for economic development and for connecting communities. He saw it as an investment in the future of the state. And, he wasn't wrong. The ability to move goods and people efficiently is crucial for prosperity.
But it sounds like that push for modernization wasn't without its challenges. Some areas struggled with the debt incurred from those road projects, and there were even some cases of corruption in how those funds are managed. It's a reminder that even well-intentioned progress can have unintended consequences.
It's a recurring theme, isn't it? The best-laid plans often encounter unforeseen obstacles, and it highlights the importance of accountability, transparency, and thoughtful planning when undertaking large-scale infrastructure projects.
Absolutely. And finally, we have Charles Hillman Breaux, who brought a very different background to the governorship. He was a university professor before entering politics, and he seemed to approach the role with a strong sense of intellectualism and moral conviction.
Breaux was a fascinating figure. He was deeply committed to education, he championed women's suffrage in primary elections, and he led the state through the turbulent years of World War I. But tragically, his legacy is also intertwined with the horrors of the Elaine Massacre of 1919.
It's a stark reminder that even during periods of supposed progress, those deep-seated racial tensions could erupt in incredibly violent and destructive ways. And the Elaine Massacre was a horrific stain on the state's history, one that Breaux, despite his progressive ideals, ultimately failed to prevent.
It's a sobering thought. It reminds us that true progress requires not only good intentions and well-crafted policies, but also a willingness to confront and dismantle the systemic structures of racism and injustice that can lead to such horrific events.
No doubt about it. So when we look at these four governors together, we see a microcosm of the progressive era in Arkansas. A period of genuine attempts at reform, but reform that was often limited, compromised, and ultimately overshadowed by the enduring legacy of racial prejudice and inequality.
It's a nuanced and often contradictory story, one that challenges us to grapple with the complexities of history and to recognize that progress is rarely a straight line. It's a journey with twists, turns, and setbacks along the way.
All right, now let's shift our focus from the state level and zoom in on the individuals who literally built Ashley County from the ground up. These weren't necessarily governors or politicians, but they were the folks who cleared the land, built the homes, established the businesses, and laid the foundations for the community we know today.
These are the unsung heroes of local history, the people whose names might not be etched in marble monuments, but whose sweat and toil are woven into the very fabric of the community. And what's so fascinating about their stories is that they reveal the human scale of history, the individual acts of courage, resilience, and ingenuity that collectively create something larger than themselves.
And one of those individuals that the Ashley County Now Posts highlight is James Carter, the namesake of Carter Township. He was one of those early settlers who wasn't just content with surviving, he was driven to build something lasting.
Carter's story is a great example of that pioneer spirit. He arrived in what was essentially a wilderness, and he set about the incredibly daunting task of clearing land, building a home, establishing a farm. It was backbreaking work, fraught with challenges, but he persevered.
It's hard to imagine the sheer amount of effort it took to transform that untamed landscape into a functioning community. And it wasn't just about individual grit either. It was about collaboration, about neighbors helping neighbors, about pooling resources and sharing knowledge.
Absolutely. It was about building those essential bonds of community, recognizing that they were all in this together. And, that spirit of collaboration, it extended beyond just the practical necessities of survival. It also shaped the social and cultural fabric of the community.
Right. Think about those early gatherings, those barn raisings, those church socials. They were about more than just work or entertainment. They were about forging those connections, those relationships that formed the backbone of a strong community.
It was about creating a sense of belonging, of shared identity, of mutual support. And, that's something that continues to be important in communities today. That sense of interconnectedness, that recognition that we're stronger together than we are apart.
No doubt about it. And another individual who played a key role in the early development of Ashley County was Robert F. McMahon, who is known for his expertise in raising livestock. In a primarily agricultural community, his knowledge was incredibly valuable.
McMahon was more than just a successful stockman. He was a resource for the entire community. People relied on his knowledge, his advice, his guidance. He helped them to thrive, to build their own successful farms and ranches.
It's amazing to think about how those informal networks of knowledge sharing were so crucial back then. It wasn't just about reading a book or attending a formal class. It was about learning from those who had practical, hands-on experience, those who had already navigated the challenges of this particular environment.
It was about apprenticeship, about mentorship, about passing down wisdom from one generation to the next. And, in a way, that tradition continues today, doesn't it? We still seek out mentors. We still learn from those who have expertise in their fields.
Absolutely. And then we have Thomas Jefferson Monroe, the local blacksmith. I mean, what a crucial role he must have played in those early days. In a time before mass-produced tools and equipment, the blacksmith was an indispensable member of any community.
Monroe wasn't just repairing tools and equipment. He was shaping the very means by which people could build their lives, cultivate their land, and create their homes. He was literally forging the tools of progress.
And his blacksmith shop? It wasn't just a workplace. It was a gathering place, a social hub where people could exchange news, share stories, and just connect with each other. It was a vital part of the community fabric.
It was like the original social media platform, right? A place where people could connect, share information, and build those essential social bonds. And it's a reminder that even in our increasingly digital world, those face-to-face interactions, those real-world connections, they still matter. They still hold a special kind of power.
They do indeed. And even something as simple as the story of Isaac Denson, who hosted the first court in his own home, it speaks volumes about the communal nature of early Ashley County.
It really does. It's like, here's this individual who steps up, opens his home to the community, and literally provides the space for justice to be administered. It's a powerful example of civic engagement, of people taking ownership of their community and its governance.
It's a reminder that democracy at its core is about participation, about people coming together to shape their collective destiny. And that spirit of participation, it's not just something that happened in the past. It's something that we need to cultivate and nurture in our communities today.
Absolutely. Now, the overarching theme that connects all of these early Ashley County builders, it's this idea of grit, of resilience, of that unwavering determination to carve out a life in what was often a challenging and unforgiving environment.
They faced hardships, they encountered setbacks, but they never gave up. They kept pushing forward, driven by a belief in the future they were building, a future for themselves and for their families.
And their legacy is all around us. The roads we travel, the fields we cultivate, the towns and cities we inhabit, they're all built upon the foundations laid by those early pioneers. It's a reminder that we are all part of a continuum, that our present is shaped by the efforts of those who came before us.
And it's a call to action, isn't it? To honor their legacy by carrying that spirit of resilience, that commitment to community, that belief in the power of collective action forward into the future.
Well said. Now let's go back to the very beginnings of Ashley County, to that time when it was still known as the Great Wilderness. It's hard to imagine now, but this whole area was once a vast expanse of untamed nature.
It's amazing to think about, isn't it? This landscape that we know so well, with its farms and towns and roads, it was once a realm of dense forests, abundant wildlife, and pristine rivers and streams. It was a place where nature truly reigned supreme.
And then people began to arrive, drawn by the promise of new opportunities, the allure of fertile land, the chance to build a life for themselves in a new and untamed territory.
It's like a classic story of human migration, isn't it? That restless spirit, that yearning for something more, that drive to explore and settle new frontiers. It's a story that's been repeated throughout human history, and it's a story that's deeply embedded in the DNA of Ashley County.
Absolutely. And those early settlers, they faced incredible challenges. Imagine trying to carve out a life in a wilderness, to clear the land, to build shelter, to cultivate crops, all while facing the uncertainties of a new and often hostile environment.
It's a testament to their resilience, their adaptability, their sheer determination to survive and thrive. They were pioneers in the truest sense of the word, and they laid the groundwork for everything that followed.
And eventually, out of that wilderness, a community began to emerge. Ashley County was officially established on November 30th, 1848, marking a pivotal moment in its history. It was a declaration of identity, a recognition that this place, this community, had come of age.
It's like a symbolic birth certificate, isn't it? And the choice of Hamburg as the county seat, that was another significant step. It established a center of governance, a focal point for the community, a place where people could come together to shape their collective destiny.
And as the community grew, so too did its institutions. They built a jail, a clerk's office, a sheriff's office, all the essential structures of a functioning society. These were physical manifestations of their commitment to law and order, to record keeping, to the common good.
And it's fascinating to see how those early structures evolved over time. The construction of courthouses, for example, those often became symbols of the community's aspirations, its growth, its sense of permanence.
They were often grand buildings, designed to inspire awe and respect, to embody the ideals of justice and civic duty. They were places where the community's most important decisions were made, where its laws were interpreted, where its conflicts were resolved.
It's a reminder that even the most mundane aspects of governance, they can have a profound impact on the lives of ordinary people. The decisions made in those courthouses, they shaped the contours of the community, they influenced the course of history.
Absolutely. And it's easy to take those structures for granted, to see them as just another part of the landscape, but they represent something deeper, something more profound. They represent the efforts of generations of people who worked to build a just and equitable society.
They represent the ongoing struggle for a more perfect union, a struggle that continues to this day. So as we reflect on the journey of Ashley County, from its humble beginnings as a great wilderness to the thriving community it is today, we're reminded of the enduring power of human ingenuity, resilience, and collaboration.
It's a story that inspires us, that challenges us, and that ultimately reminds us that we are all part of something larger than ourselves. We are all inheritors of a legacy that we have a responsibility to honor and to carry forward.
Well said. Now, let's shift gears a bit and delve into a bit of a local mystery. These Ashley County Now posts mention a certain John Carter, the namesake of Carter Township, and it seems like there's a bit of a historical puzzle surrounding him.
It's intriguing, isn't it? We know for certain that Carter Township was named in his honor, and we know that he hosted the first township election in his home back in 1850. That suggests he was a respected and trusted figure in the community.
Hosting that first election, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? It's like he was the go-to guy, the person everyone looked to for leadership and guidance in those early days.
Exactly. But beyond that one key fact, the historical record goes a bit silent. There's no known photograph of him, no comprehensive biography, no real sense of who he was beyond that one moment in time.
It's strange, isn't it? You would think that someone who played such a pivotal role in the founding of a township that includes significant areas like Hamburg and Hamilton, would have left a more substantial historical footprint.
You would, wouldn't you? But sometimes those gaps in the historical record, they can be just as fascinating as the stories we do know. They spark our curiosity. They make us wonder what other untold stories might be out there, waiting to be uncovered.
It's like a historical treasure hunt. And maybe someone out there listening has a piece of the puzzle. Maybe there's a family story, an old document, a faded photograph tucked away in an attic somewhere that could shed some light on the life of John Carter.
It would be wonderful if someone could fill in some of those blanks to give us a richer understanding of this early Ashley County figure. And, it speaks to the importance of local history, of those individual stories that often get overlooked in the grand narratives of the past.
Absolutely. Every community has its own unique cast of characters, its own unsung heroes, its own mysteries waiting to be solved. And it's up to us, those who are curious about the past, to dig a little deeper, to ask questions, to piece together those fragments of history and bring them back to life.
It's about honoring the lives of those who came before us, even if their stories haven't been fully told. And who knows, maybe one day the full story of John Carter will come to light, adding another layer of richness and depth to the tapestry of Ashley County history.
Fingers crossed. Okay, let's wrap up our deep dive with a little something different. We have this wonderful old-timey story of the week by K. Brad Barfield, and it's all about the simple joys of front porch sitting.
I love this piece. It's so evocative, so full of sensory details, so rich with the sense of place and time. It really captures the essence of a bygone era, that slower pace of life, that deep connection to community and nature.
The way Barfield describes the porch, it's like a stage for everyday life, a place where you can observe the world go by, connect with your neighbors, or just sit in quiet contemplation.
It's a liminal space, isn't it? A threshold between the private world of the home and the public sphere of the community. It's a place where you could be both a participant and an observer, where you can engage with the world on your own terms.
I love the way he describes the porch furniture. Those sturdy chairs, the well-worn swing, the ever-present wood pile. It's like you can almost feel the rough texture of the wood, smell the faint scent of sawdust and pine needles.
And then there's that beautiful image of Papa and Memo sitting together in companionable silence, their love and shared history speaking volumes, even without words. It's a testament to the enduring power of human connection, the way that decades of shared experiences can create a bond that transcends language.
And those descriptions of stormy nights, the family gathered around the kitchen table, watching the wind whip through the trees, the rain lashing against the windows. It's like you're right there with them, feeling the raw power of nature and the cozy security of home.
It's a reminder that even in the face of storms, even in the midst of life's uncertainties, there's a certain comfort and solace to be found in those simple, familiar rituals in the presence of loved ones, in the feeling of being rooted in a place.
Absolutely. And as Barfield reflects on his own growing affinity for front porch sitting, we see this beautiful transition, this gradual shift from the busyness of youth to the quiet contemplation of maturity.
It's like he's coming full circle, rediscovering the simple joys of observation, of reflection, of finding peace in the everyday moments. And it's a reminder that as we age, as life's priorities shift, sometimes the most profound experiences are found not in grand adventures, but in those quiet, contemplative moments.
It's about slowing down, paying attention, savoring the small details, and that final image of the still turning fan and the softly lit porch light. It's like a metaphor for the enduring nature of hope, of connection, of the simple beauty of being present in the moment.
It's a perfect ending, isn't it? It leaves you with a sense of peace, of contentment, of the enduring power of home and family.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Ashley County, we're reminded of the richness and complexity of history, the enduring power of community, and the importance of cherishing those individual stories that collectively shape our understanding of who we are and where we come from.
We've explored the grand sweep of historical trends, the intimate details of personal lives, the challenges and triumphs of those who came before us. And we've seen how those seemingly disparate threads are all woven together into the tapestry of a community's identity.
It's been a fascinating journey, and we hope it sparked your own curiosity about the history of your community, your family, your place in the grand scheme of things. Because ultimately, history is not just about dates and events. It's about the stories we tell, the connections we forge, and the lessons we learn along the way.
And as we go forward, let's remember those lessons. Let's honor the legacies of those who came before us. And let's continue to write the next chapter of Ashley County's story with the same spirit of resilience, innovation, and compassion that has defined its past.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of Ashley County. We'll see you next time for another journey into the past.